Mr. Raškin, welcome to Astrorum. Thank you for being here with us. I would like to ask you about your background. We know that family, surroundings, teachers shape the personality. So tell us something about your story.
Well, I was born in St. Petersburg and into a family which was very musical. My father is a famous Russian musicologist. He was also a pianist. He is also a physicist. It's a very broad education he has enjoyed in his life. And by the time I was born, I already heard him on the piano, and my brother, older brother, was playing cello. So music was always there. And I remember very well sitting on the knees of my father at the grand piano and putting my very small hands on his while he was playing. So these were the first very unconscious feelings, and I remember that playing under the piano, building a house under the grand piano with my cousin was a great time, especially when my father would be reading scores above us. So it was not a surprise and not unnatural that when I was 6, they thought I should go into music, and where do you bring a young boy if his brother is playing cello? They took me to play violin. Probably my mother was already tired of carrying a heavy cello, so they thought violin would be more practical. So they brought me to a fantastic older violin teacher who checked my hearing and clapped some rhythms and said, okay, the guy has an ear, so let's start. And I was doing that for 8 years, studying violin, and of course, not only, you know, the music education in Russia at that time in Soviet Union was one of the best. It's still very good, but at that time it was famous for it. So I was learning a lot, and of course, from very early age, I would be going to the theaters and music performances, and to the Philharmonic and in the opera theaters with my parents and my brother, my family. Music became an integral part of my life, and after I finished the school, also the normal secondary school, I went to a music college, then studied viola and started to study conducting. After that it was conservatory, and then the country I was born in didn't exist anymore. The Soviet Union collapsed, nothing new to you, you know, all this. The end of the 20th century gave the world a lot of structures that collapsed. So I left to the Netherlands, and then later studied in Germany. And you are right, not only family, but the teachers you meet during your formative years are very important. And I was really blessed with having few people who made a very strong impact on my musical personality, not only as a musician, but also as a human being. I should name my first violin teacher, who was incredibly patient, because I wanted to do everything but studying violin. Boys that age want to play football, if I was in Macedonia, then maybe handball, but and all other things, but practicing violin for hours was not on my mind. And still he was committed to say it will come one day. And then I had a fantastic teachers in viola and conducting in music college. So violin teacher was Samuel Zabezinski. He passed away a couple of years ago. My viola teacher, Daniel Miler-Šot in St. Petersburg, and especially my first conducting professor, Lev Savich. I really owe a lot as a musician, as a person. Then I moved to the West, and I graduated from the Freiburg Academy of Music in Germany from a fantastic American teacher in viola, Kim Kashkashian. She's of Armenian descent, and she was like an older colleague to me, not only as a teacher, and really opened up a lot of understanding in music. So I was really lucky to be surrounded by people who really took issues with my formative years and helped to launch partly what I am now, for sure.
And you left viola. You were very good at it.
They say, I can't say it about myself, but
critics,
I was very busy, so I probably was not very bad. Yeah, yeah.
So why conducting? I know that it's a crucial person in music. Everybody would say.
For me, it came very naturally. It was not like I first was doing only viola and then started conducting. I was 15 when I started to study both viola and conducting. So, you know, conducting is it's a little bit of a magic, because you are the only person on stage who is not making any sound. You are with this magic stick and everyone follows you and something happens, you know. If it's good, you really feel this unique energy. So once as a youngster, if you are infected by this bug, you know, that you feel that what you do with your personality, your hands, your eyes, your presence affects the sound, and you do like this and the orchestra becomes soft, and you do like this and it grows. It's a magic. If this physical difference you experience is incredible. So I knew for sure that no matter how long I will be playing as instrumentalist, and I did it for many years, as a soloist, as a chamber musician, and as an orchestral player, as a teacher, I ultimately will come to conducting, because this is a universe in music. You are everything and also nothing, because you are the only person who doesn't produce sounds, but you are everything because you don't have any limits in repertoire. You play all the instruments, all composers, all concertos, all operas, it's all yours. And as an instrumentalist, you are, of course, richly equipped, but somewhat limited.
Mm-hmm. And we know that you have to be well educated, well informed, good in theory, to know all the things in the repertoire, old, new. But what is the main thing when you say he is a real conductor? Is it a talent or some X factor?
You know, conductor is first of all a musician, as violinist and pianist. And conductor is a profession, like violin or piano or singer or trumpet player. It's a specification of what he's doing, being a musician. If you treat conductor as an instrument, but most universal, then most important is to be a musician and very highly and well-educated human being. You should know so much more about not only music, because conductor is first and foremost is a leader and inspirer. You cannot force the orchestra to play, but you must make them want to do that, you know. And you need to know why is this music written, what it is trying to describe. You need to understand the backgrounds, historical and cultural, social and community-wise. So I think that first of all, you need to be a universally educated musician with as much experience as you can have. It helped me a lot being a conductor, that I played for many years in the orchestra as a principal viola player in Amsterdam and other places. It helped a lot that I played as a soloist, standing in front of many orchestras playing my concertos. In chamber music, knowing how to listen to my partners. As a teacher, educating young musicians how to use my experience, you know. And now if I work with orchestras, youth orchestras around the world, I share this experience, but it has this pedagogical aspect that you really need to be aware. So, most of all, conductor is a musician, and he must be probably a musician that has something to tell, a story to tell through his relationship with orchestra, with the score. Conductor's part is not in the music, it's the music there. But as a conductor, you try, like a cryptographer who is facing the Egyptian pyramid, every time you can find that this or that sign means something else. Doesn't matter how many times you read and conduct the same piece of music, you can, at the end of this labyrinth, you can find something new, and this is unique because this is not fixed, you know. In a way, literature or paintings, they of course also allow interpretation, and every time you can have a different feeling about the same line in Dostoevsky, Tolstoy or Shakespeare, but it is still much more fixed in terms of what it's supposed to mean. Music allows you to express with the same line again and again incredible range of completely different feelings, and you can come always to a different conclusion with the same piece.
Never-ending process.
Absolutely, and very challenging but incredibly rewarding.
And most of the time you are engaged with an orchestra. You choose to be a principal conductor of, before Belgrade you were in Tenerife, their orchestra.
No, I'm in Tenerife and Belgrade now, both simultaneously.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was before in Germany for 12 years with the Staatsorchester Rheinische Philharmonie, and also 8 years in Poland in Lodz.
You can be a professor as a conductor, you can be a freelancer, and you are most of the time your principal conductor of orchestra.
Often,
What
yes.
is the difference? Tell us something about.
When you are principal, chief conductor or a music director of an orchestra, you are responsible for the general setup of the artistic profile of that institution. Not only you are probably the conductor who conducts most of the concerts of this orchestra, all the other come maybe once, twice. If it's a principal guest conductor like I am now in Belgrade and Tenerife, it can be 4 or 5 weeks a year, but the music director normally is more present, at least once or twice a month. You know, it can be 12 or 14 weeks a year. So he spends a lot of time with musicians. He is the most noticeable person by the audiences, and it's good if he can build up a relationship with audiences and community, but he is also responsible for all the soloists who are coming, all the programs, all the guests who are coming to perform with the orchestra. So it's not only artistic but also administrative work, and
and take care about the development of the orchestra in the
absolutely,
long term.
Absolutely. You know, the challenging thing here is also that if you treat, I don't like to make the direct comparison that orchestra for a conductor is like an instrument for an instrumentalist, but in a way I will say it's not an instrument, but it is a kind of secret laboratory. You know, it's the set of people and minds that are with you on the same page, and every time you return to the same place with the same people, you take it on another level, try to achieve something in matter of quality or of performance or emotions or artistical impact you want to achieve towards the audience. So it's always easier when you come to the same place you know so well for 1, 2 or more years, and for many programs in a season, instead of every time facing a new orchestra.
This is not your first time in Skopje, you know, Macedonian Philharmonic Orchestra. This will be just the first concert in a row, because we're expecting you in May. So what do you think? Of course you will say everything good about our orchestra, but
not necessarily, but yeah.
How can you map in the world map this?
Look, I came to Macedonian Philharmonic thanks to my many years of relationship with the Belgrade Philharmonic Orchestra, because they recommended to artistic management here that they might be interested to engage me for a certain project. So I came first time a couple of years ago. We had a very good week of hard work and good concerts with a soloist who is my very good friend, the pianist Alexeј Volodin, and the management turned to me with suggestion of coming here again. I was last season here at least 2 times, maybe even 3, no, 2 times I think, and this season I'm coming twice again. And the orchestra is definitely in process of reinventing itself and finding new voice and new quality. And one of the major achievements here, I must say, is that, of course, even in such difficult social and economical times, this little country managed to build a magnificent concert hall for the Macedonian Philharmonic Orchestra. And this is now really like a Stradivarius for the orchestra, if you can compare with a great violin, which is given to a good soloist. But Stradivarius doesn't play by itself. You still need to know how to make the best of it. And now is the time for the Macedonian Orchestra where it reinvents itself, remaps itself, requalifies, because now there is no excuse anymore. These conditions are one of the best in Central Europe, and it is completely on a par with some best halls in Germany or elsewhere around the world. So the orchestra...
This can be advantage and disadvantage too, because you can't hide behind the
Yeah, but I don't think that, for now, I think we can only speak about advantages. There were so many disadvantages in the last many years. The orchestra was performing in the Army Hall. We all know these conditions were not ideal, but what to do? Now that the orchestra has such a fantastic conditions, and not only on stage and for the audience, but also the facilities behind the stage, the rooms to practice, hold meetings, and just enjoy being at your workplace is very important, because I knew every time I came here in the past that people were going to their rehearsal, you know, like, oh, not again, because the atmosphere, it matters a lot. For example, now we're in a very nice bookstore, and you want to go through the shelves and see, you know, the atmosphere invites you to do something, to discover. So this hall definitely invites the Macedonian Philharmonic now to discover its potential and its limits. And of course, I always say what's on my mind, so I never lie. There are some deficiencies and some problems that all orchestras have. Everyone has some small problems they have to work. Even Berlin Philharmonic or Vienna Philharmonic have to work to maintain their world standard, because the moment they are just enjoying being the best, it stagnates, yeah? And for Macedonian Philharmonic now it's the time where I can really enjoy working hard, because they will hear immediately the difference. In the former conditions, it doesn't matter with how beautiful sound you play the phrase, no one will hear the difference. Yeah? And here it does. And I noticed today in the rehearsal that the orchestra starts enjoying the way they sound. And I told them, I feel that you like how you play, because next tomorrow you come, you think, I actually work not in such a bad orchestra. And that's very important.
Yeah, that's great. And what about the conductors conducting, your role models, and was it easier in the past or nowadays when you have such a big competition among soloists, conductors?
Competition was always there, you know, and there was always a place for the best. What changed is the relationship between the conductors and the orchestras. We all know stories about conductors, tyrants, you know, they were screaming at the orchestra like Toscanini or Scholti, or, you know, well, Karajan was also a, you know, personality bigger than son, but relationship with orchestra started actually to change in the era of Karajan. That orchestras are musicians, and musicians are people. You cannot treat them as some kind of parts of mechanism and just push the buttons. They are sensitive people, educated. They have sometimes knowledge which can exceed the knowledge of conductors. Some people work in the orchestra for 50 years and they are there for their whole life, and they played with 100 conductors. And then someone comes and who is half their age and start to treat them disrespectfully because he is a big maestro. This has changed. You need to strike a different kind of tone and different kind of contact with orchestras, because they are much more self-conscious. They also preserve their dignity, and they don't allow anymore this kind of tyrannic and performing because they are ordered to. They want to be inspired, they want to be led, and they want to be respected. You have to show all these things. And what became also more difficult, and I'm not afraid to talk about that, is that in the last years, and maybe in the last 10, 15 years, I see, and many of my colleagues, friends, my age or a little older, they see a certain devaluation of our profession. Now everyone who plays an instrument can get up in the morning and say, oh, I like conducting, I'll try, I'll do, you know. The orchestra in general has developed its skills much stronger than the conductors. The conductors' main technique and the ideas of what the conductor is didn't develop so much in the last 50 years, but the orchestra's ability to play without conductor has. And imagine if you have a very bad orchestra, they still can play something without a conductor. Maybe not the full symphony, but something, you know, Little Night music by Mozart. Everyone knows that they can play. But if conductor comes on stage without orchestra, what is this? It's not even a bad choreography, it's boring. He is there just waving his hands, nothing happens. So one should never forget that conductor is a serviceman, and he is always with his hand, you know, stretched out. Please play for me. And when people forget it, the problems start, you know, and there are a lot of talented and less talented conductors, young and older. Now, so much is about promotion, media, PR. Young musicians without knowledge and experience, life experience, are forced to conduct or pushed to conduct great orchestras who don't look at them. They play their thing, they don't need a conductor. They don't have a story to tell, because to tell a story about love or death or agony or pleasure or friendship or loss, or you need to experience it at first hand. You cannot even read about it. But if you are 25, you even didn't have time to read about it and not experience it altogether. So how would you tell to a person who plays in this orchestra for 40 years how to play the line which is connected with love and loss of it? Yeah, it's impossible. That's an enigma for me, and I will always trust that conducting is a profession of a second half. I'm very skeptical about, for example, this hyped TV series Maestro, you know, where some VIPs and stuff, you know, are given a baton and they are being instructed, and they are like, you know, like rabbits playing drum in front of the orchestra. It's a gag. But no one is going to make a series The Dentist or The Pilot or someone, because you don't let a person who never flew a plane fly a plane. You don't want to go to a guy who didn't graduate from medical school to work on your teeth. You know, it's not funny. But it's funny if someone, maybe from theater or management or TV, comes and suddenly is a conductor. So
talent show.
It's part of a show. This for me is hurtful, and I will always protect my profession, because it takes years of learning it and you never stop doing it. So if you use it for entertainment, it stays entertainment, nothing more than that.
How do you find a real measure to go beyond the composer and, let's say, to conduct Mahler's symphony, and not to be just Mahler and go beyond that, but not to go too far?
This is, you said exactly what it is. In a way, I repeat myself, conductor's part is not in the score. If we talk about Mahler, if we talk about Mahler, of all composers, that's a unique example, because he was not only a genius composer, but one of the most genius conductors in the history. His instructions in the score, not only musical, but also technical towards both performers and conductors, are so explicit and so clearly cultivated that, quoting Stravinsky, I would say, you don't need to interpret this music, you just need to enable it, to let it happen, because it is already there so much. And I'm very careful when I'm teaching, giving master courses to younger conductors. I always ask them questions. What is the reason that you did something completely different or quite different from what is written? Oh, I feel this way. I say, I respect that, but what about Beethoven or Tchaikovsky? They felt about this also differently, and they put down that in this particular phrase, it should not become louder or faster. Why do you trust your feelings and you don't trust the feeling of Tchaikovsky or Beethoven or Mahler? So it's a tricky balance between preserving the dignity and idea of composer without being just a scholastic and dry servant, a Kapellmeister who is just doing what's written. But Stravinsky was very right. He said, I don't like my music to be interpreted. I like my music to be performed the way I write it down. You can argue that with years, the clearness with which composers put down their ideas has increased. So more and more, especially into the 20th century, we find that so much information is there. Just trying to absorb this information and enable it might often be enough. If you go back in time to Vienna classics or Baroque, there it might be a bit more room for improvisation and interpretation, but it all comes down how much do you really trust what is written. And the second aspect is, of course, the question of tradition. You know, it's when as a young musician you are discovering a score and you hear one performance and suddenly something is played there which is not in the score, you can say, well, it's the way conductor interpreted it. But if you listen to 25 or 30 recordings, old and new, from the country of this music or somewhere else, and everyone does the same in the same place, which is not written in a score, you can think maybe it is a tradition. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the time of composer, someone performing his music has done it, he passed it on to a new generation conductor, and on and on and on. And there are places like that in famous symphonies by Dvorak or Brahms or Tchaikovsky, where Shostakovich in the 20th century, where something which is not written is genuinely done on consensus that this is a tradition. But there's a difference between tradition and bad habit, and that you need to discover
and
clearly.
Routine.
Yeah, yes, and indulging. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would like to ask you, where do you feel today more comfortable? In the past, I'm talking about the repertoire or contemporary music. You are with orchestras most of the time, symphonic music. What about opera? So
I do conduct opera. I do conduct opera also regularly, albeit much less than symphonic music. I come to symphonic music through instrumental music, through chamber music and through orchestral music, not like many people come to conducting through being a pianist in the opera, working with singers, then becoming Kapellmeister in the opera theater, then getting this chance. It's a different path. I like opera because it gives you a chance to work with singers, and human voice and singing is the origin of all instrumental music. Conducting Mozart, you always conduct opera because his music is full with action.
Symphonies, but
symphonies
he's firstly operatic.
All of this, all of his music are theatrical gestures from his opera. So you always know that something is, you know, like a curtain is opening, and this is Susanna, and this is Dorabella, and this is Figaro, and this is Don Basilio. These characters are traveling throughout his symphonies and chamber music from opera. So it's very important to know that. And if you work with wind players, you know, clarinet or trumpet or horn, they are breathing all the time because they have to play breathing. And that is closely related to singers who also have to breathe. When you work with them, you learn how to breathe in a very genuine way, and if you can transpose it to the orchestra in the symphonies, it's also very good. But in terms of symphonic repertoire, I try to embrace as much as I can, more or less specializing in everything. Nowadays, you know, for example, music of Baroque time, even classics, symphonies by Haydn, and definitely music by Bach or Handel, and before that, is a kind of prerogative of specialists, people who are informed about historical way. They know exactly how Bach was played 400 years ago. I don't, they do. I don't know why, because they cannot consult Bach, and all the sources are open. They read the sources this way, I differently. So maybe I conduct less Baroque music and more symphonic music of the 19th and 20th century, but a lot of contemporary music too, and with pleasure. And it's never stopping process of learning new things, and I premiered a lot of works, and some works were written for me. I also commissioned composers to write new works for the orchestras I was working with. It's a great challenge, but you are co-creating a process of existing music, so it's very rewarding also, especially if you can work with a composer who is there now in the hall, and you can ask him questions about what does he mean, how shall we shape it this way or that way. This kind of back and forth relationship is very important, and it is not a surprise if I tell you that, of course, I feel very strongly connected with the Slavic repertoire, Russian music from 19th, 20th century, be it Tchaikovsky or Mussorgsky, Borodin, Glazunov, but later Shostakovich, Prokofiev, and so on. I worked in Poland as music director for many years and principal guest conductor. I have a large Polish repertoire. I, of course, conduct a lot of German music after so many years in Germany, and of course this is the fundamentals of symphonic repertoire. But like this week, I bring music by Jean Sibelius to Skopje. Here in Macedonia, Sibelius is not played very often, but I conduct a lot of Nordic and Scandinavian music, and this is very interesting part. I grew up in St. Petersburg, so close to Finnish border, so nature and light and all that is very clear to me. As I said before, as a conductor, you can embrace all the repertoire. There are no limits, and this is so rewarding.
It's a pleasure to talk to you because you're such a complex personality, not as a musician. Or don't you? My last question would be about your another interests, and I have that impression that young conductors they're preoccupied with the music and with the conducting, but few of them are reading, they're interested in literature. About the audience, are they well educated to feel those shades in the interpretation you were talking about before?
Some are, most are not. They are the typical children of our digital generation. They are very quick with all the gadgets, and they read everything maybe from the small screen. They forgot the smell of paper when you open the book, and this magic is not known to them. I love reading. I lack the time I would like to devote to reading as much as I can. Lately I'm absorbed with reading a lot of material about all kind of historical aspects, not only generally, but I always try to go beyond the surface. Anytime I'm going somewhere, working with the orchestra like now in Macedonia or in Canada or in Spain, I always try to, or in South America, I was last in Chile and was reading a lot about the Chilean history. It takes time, and I really would love to have more, but in any case, reading is a great source of information and inspiration. I love visiting museums. If I have a chance going somewhere during the rehearsals, I will. But my great passion when I'm at home, just to relax and switch off and do something completely different, is cooking. And I can tell you that there are a lot of similarities between the work of chief conductor and chief in the kitchen, you know? Because we work with different ingredients, we mix together, and then there's a product at the end. And the most important complexity of the common things between cooking and conducting is that in both cases you need someone who will accept the results. In terms of conducting, it's the audience. You share with your music, and in terms of cooking, it's people who you're cooking for. And that's the most wonderful, if you can cook for a family or friends, you know, and just hear their opinion about how your symphony of meat and vegetables have worked for them.
I don't know about your cooking, but I would give you 5 Michelin stars for your conducting. Thank you very much. Thank you for this conversation, and I wish you all the best, and I hope that we will enjoy your concerts in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you.